Now, one part of tackling too big to fail is to bring these large, complex firms under more stringent scrutiny, more supervision, more capital reserves, more stress tests, more restrictions on their activities. But the other side of tackling too big to fail is, well, failing. In the crisis, the Fed and the the other financial agencies faced a terrible choice of either trying to prevent some large firms such as AIG from failing, which was a bad choice because it ratified too big to fail and meant that the firms were not adequately punished for the risks they took or letting them fail and potentially destabilize the whole financial system and the economy. So that is the too big to fail problem. The only way to solve that problem in the end is to make it safe for a big firm to fail. One of the main elements of the Dodd-Frank Act is what is called the Orderly Liquidation Authority, which has been given to the FDIC. The FDIC already has the authority to shut down a failing bank, and it can do that quickly and efficiently, typically over the weekend, and depositors are made whole. The FDIC's ability to do that has prevented panics and bank runs since the 1930s. The idea here is that the FDIC will do something similar, but for large, complex firms, which obviously is much more difficult. But in cooperation with the Fed and with regulators from other countries in the case of multinational firms, work is underway to prepare. So, should it happen that a large firm comes to the brink of insolvency and cannot find a solution, cannot find new capital, for example, the Fed's ability to intervene the way we did in 2008 has been taken away. Legally, we cannot do that anymore. The only option we will have is to the only option we will have is to work with the FDIC to safely wind down the firm, and that will ultimately reduce or we hope eliminate the too big to fail problem. There are many other aspects of the Dodd-Frank Act. Another vulnerability I discussed was the exotic financial instruments, derivatives, and so on, that concentrated risk. There is a whole set of new rules that require more transparency about derivatives positions, um, standardization of derivatives, and trading of derivatives through third parties called central counterparties. The idea here is to take derivatives and those transactions out of the shadow to make them vulner, to make them if it is if it makes them vulnerable, then that's another problem. The idea here is to take derivatives and those transactions out of the shadow to make them available and visible to both the regulators and the markets to avoid a situation like we saw during the crisis. The Federal Reserve did not do as good a job as it should have in protecting consumers on the mortgage front. So the Dodd-Frank Act creates a new agency called the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is meant to protect consumers in their financial dealings and That would include things like protections on the terms of mortgages, for example. So there is quite a variety of aspects of Dodd-Frank. It is a large and complex bill, and there has been a lot of complaining about the fact that it is large and complex. The regulators are doing their best to implement these rules in a way that will be effective and at the same time minimize the costs to the industry and to the economy. That is difficult, but it is an ongoing process. We do that through an extensive process of putting out proposed rules, gathering comments from the public, looking at those comments, making changes to the rules, and so on. It is an iterative process through which we put in place these regulatory standards. And again, it is still very much underway. Let me conclude by saying a couple of things about the future. Central banks, not just in the United States, but around the world, have been through a very difficult and dramatic period, which has required a lot of rethinking about how we manage policy and how we manage our responsibilities with respect to the financial system, in particular during much of the World War II period, because things were relatively stable, because financial crises were things that happened in emerging markets and not in developed countries. Many central banks began to view financial stability policy as a junior partner to monetary policy. It was not considered as important. It was something to which they paid attention, but it was not something to which they devoted many resources. Obviously, based on what happened during the crisis and the effects we are still feeling, it is now clear that maintaining financial stability is just as important a responsibility as maintaining monetary and economic stability. And indeed, this is a return to where the Fed came from in the beginning. Remember that the reason that the Fed was created was to try to reduce the incidence of financial panics. Financial stability was the original goal in creating the Fed. So now we have come full circle. 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 I think if I put shadow like here in dark color, I might I might look better. But this is the problem, not eye color. Hello. Anyway, again, where were we? We have come full circle. We have come full circle. This is the sentence of today. We have come full circle. We have come full circle. I was getting better and coughing seems coming back. I have come full circle. Financial crises will always be with us. So we are not lonely. That is probably unavoidable. We have had financial crises for 600 years in the Western world. Periodically, there are going to be bubbles or other instabilities in the financial system. But given what the potential for damage is now, as we have seen, it is really important for central banks and other regulators to do what we can. First, to anticipate or prevent a crisis, but also, if a crisis happens, to mitigate it and to make sure the system is strong enough to make it through the crisis intact. Again, we began by noting the two principal tools of central banks, serving as lender of last resort to prevent or mitigate financial crises, and using monetary policy to enhance economic stability. In the Great Depression, as I described, those tools were not used appropriately, but in the recent episode, the Fed and other central banks use these tools actively. I should also say that there has been a great convergence that other major central banks have followed policies very similar to that of the Fed. And in any case, I believe that by using these tools actively, we avoided much worse outcomes in terms of both the financial crisis and the depth and the severity of the resulting recession. A new regulatory framework will be helpful, but again, it is not going to solve the problem. The only solution in the end is for us, regulators, and our successors to continue to monitor the entire financial system and to try to identify problems and to respond to them using the tools that we have.